Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bhante. Good to see you, Kevin. You, Melvin, who says, "Good morning, everyone. Have a great." Now it's our standard greeting. Greeno, Bino, Scott, Julia, Nora, Jerry, Judith, Sai, Jens, Victoria, Andy, Ryan. I'm not sure who Gleam Tech is, what their real name is, but hello, Gleam Tech, and hello, Ella. Good to see you all online. Oh, Gleam Tech says this is Shab from Students of the Path. Great, wonderful. Good to see you all. And also Reed is online and Suzanne. Wonderful. Okay, great. So this morning we're starting our first weekend online retreat. So we will be meeting several times throughout the day. And we will be starting this morning with some chanting. So if you scroll all the way up on the live chat, there is a link to some chanting that you can follow along. And then Bhante will be giving some instructions on how to go with your practice this morning. And then we'll also be guiding us in meditation. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Bhante so we can start the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll start by doing 3 bows to the Buddha, and then we'll do the chanting that you hopefully have in front of you, and we'll take it from there. So we'll turn towards the altar. Do 3 bows. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranam gacchami. Dhammang saranam gacchami. Sanghang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Adinnādāna veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Kāmesu micchāchāra veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Suramerayamajjapamadattana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Itipiso bhagava araham samma sambuddho Vijjacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu Nanuttaro Purisadhammasarati Sattva deva manussanam buddho bhagavati Swakato bhagavata dhammo sannitiko akaliko evasiko panayiko Pachatam veditabo vinyuhiti Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Samicipatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Yanidam chattari purisa yugani atta purisa bhugala Esa bhagavato savaka sangho Bahuneyo bahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo Anuttaram punya ketam lokasati. Okay, good morning, everyone. So today we'll be practicing meditation together. So for this weekend, today and tomorrow, we'll be exploring a quite different approach to Vipassana meditation than what I was leading previously. So last weekend, I think it was, I was focusing on starting with doing mindfulness of the body, and then with that as a basis, developing the recognition of impermanence. This weekend, I'd like to focus on practicing the contemplation of the 6 elements as a foundation for developing the recognition of not-self. So a few days ago, I gave a talk on anatta, on not-self, which was laying out the basic principles of this concept. So the concept basically being that everything is impersonal, that there is nothing which can be said to be me or mine. There is nothing which is ultimately our true self, which can be ultimately said to be absolutely, eternally me. There's nothing which is definitively me. And like everything else in the Buddha's teachings, this is something which is meant to be experienced. It's not something which we're just supposed to believe in, but rather it's something that we're meant to experience, something that we're meant to try to feel for ourselves, to experience for ourselves. And there are some ways of practicing anatta very directly. The most common method that the Buddha gives in the suttas is to go through the different components of body and mind, and for each component to tell yourself, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. So that's a very direct way, but it's also quite challenging because it's trying to go directly to the experience of not-self. So if you can use that method effectively, then by all means, go ahead and use that method. But for most of us, a slightly more roundabout approach tends to be more effective. And the reason for this is because our mind is deeply habituated to the perspective of self. Our mind is deeply habituated to seeing the world in terms of me, to seeing the world in terms of myself and what belongs to me. So to go directly to the opposite viewpoint is quite difficult. It's like trying to get a car to turn around instantaneously. It's not so easy. To get a car to turn around, you have to make a long, wide circle. Uh, and similarly, uh, to get our mind to turn around from the perspective of self to the perspective of not self, uh, sometimes the most direct method is not the best. So we use something a little more roundabout, something which can kind of fool the mind into not realizing what we're doing until it's too late and we're already fully entrenched in the perspective of not self. So the meditation on the six elements is a way of once again dividing up our experience into pieces. This is one of the characteristics of Theravada meditations in general, is this tendency to divide things up into component pieces and then to analyze those component pieces one at a time. So we see this all throughout the suttas. So some of the common division methods that the Buddha uses are the five aggregates, the five khandhas. So body, feeling, recognition, thought, and consciousness. So going through each one of those parts individually. Another one is the six senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. So again, going through each one of those six individually and seeing each one as not self. And another one he uses is the six elements. So the six elements are aspects of our experience, ways that we relate to our experience, ways that we categorize our experience. And the traditional list of six elements that we find in the Pali Canon is earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. So these are aspects of our experience. So earth is the aspect of solidity, of firmness, of hardness. So the feeling of solid matter. The water element is the experience of liquidity, of things which are fluid, of flowing, of wet. The experience of things which are not solid in the way that the earth element is solid, but which still do have a certain amount of uh, minimal density to them. So water is not completely hollow. There's a certain amount of minimal density to it. And it has this quality of being wet and cohesive. It helps things stick together and come together. And the third one is the fire element. So this is the experience of heat, the experience of warmth, the experience of temperature, of energy. And again, this is something that we can feel. So you can feel the warmth of the body. You can feel the heat of the body. And the heat of the outside world as well. And the fourth one, the air element. This is again, the experience of inflation and deflation. So the experience of things inflating, the experience of expansion. The air element also has the quality of supporting, this feeling of holding us up, holding things in place. The air element also has the quality of being relatively easy to pass through, relatively easy for things to move through. So the air element also has the quality of movement. It's related to the experience of things moving. Then the space element is the vast openness in which the first four elements appear, in which the first four elements move around and interact. So the space element is more like the container within which physical things appear. And the consciousness element, similarly, is the container in which everything else appears. It's the vast, spacious openness in which everything else appears. So the first five elements, as well as all the mental objects and experiences, thoughts and emotions and all of that appears within the consciousness element. So these are what we call the six elements. So in Pali, the word is dhatu. And again, it's important to recognize that the six elements are not making pronouncements about physical science. So if that's what you want, go to a physics class or a chemistry class, and you'll have a completely different experience with the word element. But rather, the six elements, the six dhatus, it's talking about aspects of our experience, how we experience the world. So it's talking about subjective mental experience. It's not talking about objective physical reality. So when the Buddha talks about the six elements, he's not actually saying that everything is made up of little chunks of earth mixed with little chunks of water and little chunks of fire and little chunks of air. That's not what he's saying. I'm sure that if the Buddha went to a chemistry class, he would have no objection to what the chemistry teacher was saying. But rather, what the Buddha is talking about, once again, is subjective mental experience. So we don't usually relate to the world in terms of carbon atoms and aluminum atoms and helium atoms. We relate to the world in that, oh, this feels hard and solid. Oh, this feels wet and liquid. Oh, this feels warm or cold. Oh, this air is blowing through the room. Like, that's how we relate to the world. Except maybe if you're a chemistry professor, then you might relate to the world a little bit differently. But most of us, we relate to the world in terms of how solid do things feel? How wet do things feel? How warm do things feel? How much movement is there in the air? Like, this is how we relate to the world. So the six elements then are ways that we relate to our experience. And the relationship that this has to not self. So for this, I base this meditation practice mostly on one of the Buddha's discourses to Rahula. So there's many, many discourses where the Buddha was teaching Rahula. And Rahula was the Buddha's son. So before the Buddha became a wandering monastic, he had a son. And then after the Buddha attained enlightenment, one of the first things he did was he went back to his former wife and his son, and he taught them Buddhism, and they both became monastics and they both became enlightened. So then we have many suttas of the Buddha teaching his son Rahula, different aspects of the Dhamma and different practices. And one of the practices that he taught to Rahula was this meditation on the six elements. And what the Buddha did was he said, for each one of these elements, you feel it within yourself, then you recognize that the element internally is exactly the same as the element externally. So in this way, we can see that there is no separation, there is no difference, there is no division between each element internally and externally. Therefore, none of it is me or mine. It's just a function of the natural world. It's not me, it's not mine, it's just a function of the natural world. So this is a way of relating to the teaching on not self in a practical way. So the way that I recommend doing this practice, and in a few minutes I'll lead a period of guided meditation to get all of us started on this. The way I recommend doing this practice is to start by focusing on feeling the element within yourself. So, for example, with the earth element, you're focusing on the experience of solid, hard, dense matter. within your own body. So focusing on the experience of the body as this big, hard, dense, solid lump right here. Kind of like your body is a big stone or a pile of dirt. Uh, just this big heap of solid matter. And really focus first on getting a powerful, intense, direct experience of the body as made up of solid matter. It's made up of heavy, hard, dense, solid matter. And once that recognition is firmly established in the mind, once you're fully mindful and you have strong samadhi, focusing on this experience of the body as hard, heavy, solid, dense uh, earth element, then you recognize that the floor you're sitting on or the chair you're sitting on is made up of exactly the same heavy, hard, solid, dense matter. It's made up of exactly the same earth element. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, it's exactly the same earth element. It's all made up of the same matter as this body, same solid matter. And outside, the trees, the grass, the soil, the other buildings around you, the whole planet, in fact, all the planets and everything in the whole universe, it's all the same solid matter. And this body is constantly exchanging solid matter with the outside world. So a few minutes ago, we had breakfast. In other words, we put a bunch of earth element inside the body. Um, Possibly later on today, we'll go to the restroom and we'll remove some solid matter from the body. We'll remove some earth element from the body. And in fact, as we go throughout our day, we're also constantly shedding skin cells and bits of hair from the body. So we're constantly shedding earth element, which then disintegrates into dust. So we're taking earth element from outside and putting it into the body, and we're constantly shedding earth element from the body. So then we can see how it's all just the same matter. It's all just the same stuff. And we can also see how something which is not me, for example, you look at your plate or your bowl, and there's some food on the plate, and you recognize, oh, that's not me. It's just a bunch of earth element. It's some plants. That's all. Some earth element. It's made up of dirt like everything else. But then we put it inside our body. And at some point, shortly after putting it in our body, we then relate to it as me. Now, when exactly that happens is actually a bit hard to pin down. So you pick up a spoonful of food and you put it in your mouth. The moment the food goes in the mouth, is it me? No. You spit it back out on the plate, it's still clearly not me. So you put it in your mouth, still clearly not me. You chew it, it gets all mashed up and mixed with saliva and mucus inside your mouth. Is it me or is it not me now? It's mixed up with saliva and mucus, which is part of your body. So is it me or is it not me? Well, if you spit it out on your plate, do you still recognize it as not me? Okay. So swallow it down. So mashed up food mixed with saliva and mucus, you swallow it down into your stomach, lands in your stomach, and it mixes with your stomach fluids. Is it still not me, or has it become me? When does it become me? Maybe you vomit it back up. Is it still me, or is it not me? What is it? So the food is in your stomach. It's mixed now with saliva, mucus, and stomach fluids. So it's gradually becoming more and more integrated into the rest of the body. And yet we still have this sense of, well, it's not me. It's just some food I've eaten, which is now resting in my stomach. And if you then vomit, you don't think, oh, I just vomited up part of me. No, we think, oh, I vomited up the food that I just ate. We don't think I ejected a part of myself from the body. We think, oh, I ejected some insufficiently digested food from the body. But actually, while it's resting inside your body, and actually even from the moment it enters your mouth, the food starts breaking down and it starts going into your bloodstream. It starts getting integrated into the rest of the body. So it's already becoming part of the body, inseparable from the body. So is that me? When does it become me? And then similarly, when hair particles and dust and fingernails and so on are falling off from the body, uh, when does it become not me? When does it switch from being me to not me? Or when you go to the toilet uh, and then you look down in the toilet and you're like, oh, I just left part of me in the toilet. This is disastrous. A big chunk of myself has just gone in the toilet. This is unacceptable. No, we just think, oh, gross. And then we flush the toilet and a big chunk of ourself disappears down into the sewers. Such a disaster. But just a moment ago, that was part of ourself. So there's this process where something which is clearly not me, such as food, gets put into the body where it's still clearly not me, and it passes through the processes of the body, it's still clearly not me, and it comes out the other end of the body, and it's still clearly not me. So at what point could it possibly be me? Every step along this of this process, it's still just earth element. It's exactly the same earth element every step of the way. When is it me? When is it not me? When is it self? When is it not self? So, by relating to things purely as impersonal earth element, as just being a part of nature, an aspect of nature, then we can see that every step of the way it's not me. There actually isn't any step along this process in which the food is me. Every step along the way, it's not me. Every step along the way, it's just dirt. It's just earth element. It's not me. So the meditation practice then is to first become deeply familiar with the experience of earth element, the experience of hard, solid matter within the body. Uh, and then to recognize that all the earth element around the body, outside the body, is exactly the same earth element. And that we're constantly exchanging earth element inside and outside the body. And even things which are inside the body, we often don't relate to as me. So there's this bizarre, arbitrary process by which we label certain parts of earth element me and certain parts of earth element not me. But fundamentally, it's all not me. It's all simply earth element. It's exactly the same inside and out. It's just earth element. That's it. And then the same for each of the other elements. So I think over the course of these 2 days, um, I'll try to give some guidance on how to do this practice with each of the 6 elements. Um, so this morning, I think we can start with the earth element, and I might introduce the water element as well, depending on how things go. Um, and we'll get to the other elements as we go throughout the day. Again, this is something which is meant to be felt, it's meant to be experienced. So I think I've said more than enough. If you want more of the theory, go back to the talk I gave on anatta a few days ago, and that'll give you a little more of the theory behind not self. What we're focused on today is the practice, getting the experience of relating to the body as not me, relating to the body as not mine, not who I am, but just as being a lump of earth element, a clump of dirt, just like everything else around us. So, without further ado, please go ahead and get in meditation posture. If you're not sitting in full lotus, this time of quarantine and isolation is a great chance to brush up on your yoga and stretching practices so that hopefully by the end of the pandemic, we'll all be sitting full lotus because you can no longer say that you don't have time because you've got time. So it's a great time to improve your flexibility so that you can sit like the Buddha sat. I see some eye rolling from the physical audience present in the room, which means there's probably some eye rolling from the remote audience as well. But once again, I'm really not kidding when I talk about full lotus. It actually does help. That said, the difference it makes is relatively subtle. So for the first few years of your practice, you might not notice much of a difference. But definitely later on, as your practice develops, it's worth trying to develop this sitting posture as it's quite supportive. So sitting up straight, relaxing your shoulders, you might stretch out your neck and back a little bit, making sure you're settled properly on the cushion without putting pressure on anything. So if you position your legs and buttocks and thighs properly at the start of the meditation, then your legs will not fall asleep. This is quite important. Similarly, if you position your spine and neck correctly and your shoulders correctly, then you won't experience back pain. So sitting up nice and straight. Take a few long, slow, deep breaths. With each breath, letting the body relax. When the body is relaxed, you can allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm. And bring attention to your body. So feeling the whole body sitting here immobile, heavy, dense, solid, like a stone statue, like a pile of dirt. So feeling the hard, heavy, dense, solid aspect of the body. Feeling the earth-like experience of the body. For now, we're not paying attention to any other characteristic or aspect of our experience. We're just focusing on the experience of solidity, of heaviness, of weight, of density, the earth element of the body, the earth like experience. Keep bringing your mind to the earth element of the body. If you find yourself getting distracted or lost in thought, then you can use an internal repetition. Might repeat words like heavy, solid, dense. You might repeat simply earth, earth, earth. Whatever helps you stay focused on paying attention to the heavy, solid, dense hardness of the earth element. So, feeling those aspects of the body. And as you focus on the earth element of the body, experience of solid, hard matter, recognize that it's the same experience of the clothing against your skin. It's the same. It's hard, it's solid, it's dense. It's the same as the cushion beneath you. It's the same as the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It's all made up of exactly the same hard, dense, solid matter as your own body. It's all made up of the same earth element, the same solid matter. So this body is no different from the cushion, the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It's just made up of the same stuff. It's the same as the trees, the buildings, the mountains, the whole great earth, all the planets and stars and asteroids, everything throughout the whole universe. It's all made up of exactly the same solid matter. So the solid matter in this body is identical with the solid matter outside this body. So feeling the solid matter of this body, the earth element of this body, as identical with the solid matter of the clothing around it, the cushion beneath it, the building enclosing it, the planet on which it sits, all of it together. It's all just one massive earth element. Just as the earth element of the floor and the walls and the ceiling is not me, the same way the solid matter of this body is not me. It's just earth element changing position, coming in through one hole and out the other, flowing through a certain region, shifting and changing, but always simply earth element. Not me, not mine, just an aspect of the natural world. It's just earth element coming and going, shifting and changing, moving from one place to another. Feeling the earth element of the body as indistinguishable from the earth element outside the body. Feeling the earth element of the body as inseparable from the earth element outside the body. Feeling the earth element in the body as not me, just as the earth element outside the body is not me. So letting go of any sense of inside and outside, and just dwelling aware of earth element, not me, not mine, just earth element, an aspect of the natural world. Hard, solid, dense, not me, not mine, just earth element. Hard, solid, dense, not me, not mine, just earth. Keep coming to the feeling of the body as inseparable from the outside world. The body is not separate from the clothing. The body is not separate from the cushion, not separate from the floor, not separate from the building, not separate from the whole earth, not separate from the whole universe. It's just earth element. No inside, no outside, just earth. So you can relax your posture. You can take your legs out of the lotus position. You can do a little stretching if you need to. Just take a few seconds just to rest in the peacefulness of the mind. So not doing anything in particular. Just resting in the sense of peacefulness and stability, spaciousness, and joy, the residue of the meditation practice. And at this time, if there's any questions or anything anyone wants to ask um, about the instructions that were given or about the meditation practice just now, this is your time to ask. Um, and after handling any questions that come up here, then we can practice on our own for a while. And I'll be giving some more instructions this afternoon. But do we have any questions or anything, any comments that should be addressed?
Thank you, Bhante, for leading us in meditation. As of now, there was only like a question from Marielle. Hello, Marielle. But I think it was already answered actually by Reed and Sarah. But anyway, she was asking, are we speaking about the specific Buddha, right? There were hopefully are many Buddhas, including the one that was a prince, right? And Reed had answered he's referring to Gautama, the historical Buddha from 2,500 years ago. And Sarah echoed that he's talking about Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha for this age. And Gautama and Shakyamuni are the same, FYI. So I think that, unless you wanted to add something on that.
Well, I mean, the truth is that every Buddha teaches the same thing. All Buddhas teach the same things. Depending upon the conditions, um, they teach in somewhat different ways, but fundamentally they all teach the same things. So I do base what I talk about primarily on Shakyamuni Buddha because that's most of the material that we have. But actually, fundamentally, all Buddhas teach the same things. They all teach anicca, anatta, sunyata, paticca samuppada. They all teach the same things.
Thank you. And James says, how do you do this meditation with regard to the consciousness element?
So you're getting a little ahead of the program. I think we'll probably get into the conscious element tomorrow. And that's the most difficult of the 6. And without being well grounded in the first 5, it's very difficult to practice with the 6th one, with the consciousness element. So the 6 elements are in a progressive order. If you notice, the 6 elements start from the most coarse and progress to the most refined. They start from the most obvious and progress to the most subtle. So earth, water, fire, air, space, consciousness. So similarly, in meditation, usually we do it in that order because we're starting with the easy one and we're going towards the hard one. But as we go through these different meditation exercises, these 6 different meditation practices, then you'll probably find that 1 or 2 of them you feel a particularly strong connection with. So for me, earth element is pretty good, but actually fire element is usually the one which I find my mind settles into the most easily. That's usually the one I find where my mind is most easily able to enter the perception of not self. And probably this afternoon sometime I'll go into some instructions on the fire element. And you'll see at that time how you relate to these different practices. The consciousness element it's very subtle and it's very difficult. So we'll start with the other 5 first and get to that one tomorrow.
Thank you, Bhante. And Reed asks, the transition from hardness of my body to the inclusion of the hardness of everything else is difficult, since it's clearly easier to be aware of it in my body. Is there a good way to transition to eliminating that sense of separation between my earth element and everything else's?
Yeah, so first off is feeling your clothing, because your clothing is very close to your body, but it's also very clearly not your body. But it's something that you can feel directly. And next is whatever you're sitting on. Again, it's very close to your body. It's very easy to feel it directly, but it's also not your body. So this is starting to get a sense of earth element outside the body. As for the sense of inseparability, this is one of the reasons why I brought up the example of food. the process of eating. Because that's a case where we take earth element from outside the body and put it inside the body, and it gets processed through the body and mixes and merges with the body, and then part of the body comes out the other end. So that's a process through which we can see that this body is not separate from the earth element around it. It's just this process of earth element shifting and changing place, shifting and changing um, its details, but not changing its nature, not changing its essence. It's still just earth element. It's just the same solid matter. But yeah, in terms of the meditation practice, then usually the easiest thing to do is to start to focus on the external earth element that you can directly feel. So your clothing and the cushion beneath you. Okay.
Julia says this type of meditation was a bit challenging. Thank you. And Mehmet says, thank you. When we're focusing on the earth element of the outside world, do we imagine it since we're not feeling them at the moment? We're not touching the building?
So one of the interesting things that you might find as your awareness becomes increasingly subtle and refined is that you can feel it. Of course, the more distant something is, the harder it is to feel, uh, but you can feel it. Okay?
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So Matthew says, do you see any benefit in trying to feel slash sense both sides of the qualities, such as hardness and softness, heaviness and lightness?
I think that's overly complicating it, to be honest. What we're Because whether something is particularly hard or particularly soft, it still has the same quality of resistance, to be exact. It's just a matter of how resistant it is. Uh, Similarly, whether something is particularly heavy or particularly lightweight, it still has the quality of heaviness. It's just a matter of how much heaviness it has. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the solidity, the experience of something which is relatively solid, as opposed to the other elements which are not solid. Okay.
And Melvin says, would light, as in inner light, be considered part of the fire element?
Inner light. I don't understand what you mean by that.
Maybe Melvin, if you want to clarify in the live chat, and we'll get back to it later. And Reed said, oh, geez, I guess you did address my question in your instructions, Bhante. Apologies.
No worries. It's fine.
And Mehmet says, would you call the electric feeling of piti a manifestation of the fire element?
Wow, I've never thought of the relationship between PT and the six elements. That's a very interesting question. Fire element. No, I don't think so. To be honest, I actually think of it as a mind object. Yeah, it's a mind object which manifests physically, but I actually don't think of it in terms of the six elements at all. Um, yeah, yeah, I just don't think of it in terms of the six elements. Fire element is just heat. So PT is not physical heat. PT is this extremely pleasant feeling all through the body. So it's not really directly related to any one of the elements as far as I can tell, any one of the physical elements anyway. It actually seems more closely related to the consciousness element than it does to any of the physical ones. But we feel it through the body. But I wouldn't define it as fire element, no. No, I just wouldn't define it in terms of the physical elements at all. Um, I'll look at it in meditation and get back to you on that one because I've never explored the connection between PT and the six elements. Thank you for bringing up a very interesting question.
And Yulia says, if it's all the same earth elements, why the eighth precept says we cannot sleep on an elevated bed?
So that's about renunciation. And elevated is perhaps not the best translation. So ucha, it can mean high or elevated in a physical sense, but its more general meaning is like grand or magnificent. So the eighth precept, it's not literally about having a high bed, but it's about having a over the top luxurious bed. It's about having an excessively grand and magnificent bed. So I sleep on a single mattress on the floor. And that's plenty for me. It's not grand, it's not luxurious, but it gets the job done. So that's more the point. Like, we're not trying to have some big, grand, magnificent, luxurious thing, which inspires us to just lounge around in bed all day. We just need something that gets the job done, something that helps us sleep enough so that we're rested for the day. But that's it.
And James asks, well, I think it's referred to Melvin. So he says, inner light like commentary jhana, Melvin. So we'll see what Melvin has to say with that. And Suzanne says, I could not overcome the sense that I am more air than solid.
Hmm.
At the same time, reminding myself I am solid and part of the world outside is a welcome concept in isolation.
Hmm.
Reminding me I am not, in fact, isolated, but connected to everyone and everything.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's a question there. I'll see what happens during the air element meditation.
Yeah, you might find that you have a stronger affinity to the air element. Usually, when people do these six meditations, they find that one or two of them they have a very strong connection with. One or two of them they just click with very easily. And often they find that a couple of these practices are really hard for them, and that's normal. So I'll give some more instruction about that later on, probably tomorrow. I'll talk a bit more about how to relate to the different elements depending on your affinities. Um, but yeah, just for now, it's normal. If you find your mind gravitating towards the air element, well, for now, try to hold back from that. Try to really stay focused on the earth element because that might actually be what you need to develop right now. If you said that it felt nourishing, that sense of connection with the earth, well, that's great. That's good. Uh, Build that up. Cultivate that sense of connectivity because that it's very psychologically nourishing, as well as being a foundation for the arising of insight.
And Reed asks, so just to be clear, the result of these element meditations may be that we find one that really works for us, not that they necessarily have to be practiced together. That is, after experimenting with them, those we don't have an affinity for could potentially be set aside and ignored rather than struggled with.
We'll talk tomorrow. Yes and no. Mostly no, but partly yes. You'll see.
That was the last question for now, but there might be something else that comes up. Melvin said, never mind, wrong tradition. Sorry.
Wrong tradition?
I think related to the inner light. It might be a concept that is present, perhaps in
Hinduism or something?
Vajrayana, maybe, since I believe that Melvin studies in Vajrayana as well.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It would have to be clearly explained to me what is meant by that, and then I could talk about it. But as it is, I just don't know what is meant by inner light. So, um, if the term is defined, I can talk about it. If it's not defined, I don't know.
Mehmet,
So more?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Mehmet says, isn't it mentioned as four elements in the suttas, including space within the air element? Isn't everything a manifestation of these four or six elements, or do we separate the mind?
So in some suttas, the Buddha speaks about the four elements as being physical matter. So our experience of the physical world is the four elements. And in some suttas, the Buddha includes space and consciousness for a more complete list. So the four elements is meant to be a complete description of how we experience physical things. And the six elements is meant to be a complete description of how we experience everything. So no, space is not part of the air element. Space is distinct from the air element. And when I go over the meditation instructions for air and space element, you'll see why I say that. They're distinctly different things. And our experience of them is distinctly different. So sometimes the Buddha said four when he wanted to emphasize physical experience, and sometimes he said six when he wanted to give a more complete practice that encompassed all parts of our experience.
And Suzanne says, thank you. I'm curious how people with bulimia would respond to this and if they would find it helpful.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't have any experience with um, helping people with bulimia.
Marielle says, if we feel affinity with an element, does it mean we can use it for our advantage in our lives? Perhaps a person with an affinity to the earth element dedicates to a profession where and I think he helps to ground things.
Well, I think that people will just do that naturally anyway. What people feel an affinity with, then they tend to gravitate towards, and they tend to do things of that sort anyway. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It's just something that people tend to do. Um, we do what we feel an inclination towards. So those who feel a connection with something will tend to do that. But that doesn't really mean anything significant. It's just people who like golf play golf. It doesn't mean anything. So people who feel an affinity with the earth element might do more earthy kinds of things, but it doesn't really mean anything. Because ultimately we're trying to recognize that also our preferences and tendencies are not self. Our preferences and tendencies are not who we really are. They're just conditional experiences, which can change. Anything else?
Yes, James is just adding. Also, read you're not off base there. Majjhima Nikaya 28 suggests one could pick an element and use it solely to awaken.
Anyway, we'll talk about that more later. So thank you for pointing that out.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's all for now. Thank you so much, Bhante, for taking the time to guide us in meditation and answering all these questions. And perhaps maybe you can give some instructions for the morning. So it's 9:15 right now, and we won't be meeting again online until 1:30 p.m. So maybe some instructions and pointers on how to proceed with the morning.
Yeah, so what I'd recommend is at this time, once we end the live stream, you can do some walking meditation. And during the walking meditation, still try to stay aware of the earth element. So feeling the heaviness and solidity of the body as you do walking meditation. Then after doing maybe 10 or 20 minutes of walking, do some more sitting meditation, continuing with the meditation on the earth element. Then later on this morning, make yourself a nice simple lunch. And as you're working, again, stay focused on feeling the earth element as you prepare your lunch. When you eat, you can use the contemplation on the earth element that I was speaking about earlier. If you use the restroom sometime today, again, contemplate the earth element as not self. Uh, and after lunch, you can have a little bit of a break. Or if you're feeling fired up and ready to go, you can just get right back into your meditation practice. If you do meditate immediately after having lunch, it is highly recommended to start with some walking meditation. If you go directly to sitting after eating, then you might fall asleep. It's very likely. So it's usually recommended if you meditate right after eating, start with some walking meditation. And as mentioned, at 1:30, we'll have another live stream, and I'll give some more instructions at that time. Okay.
Great. So if you have also any questions that arise during your practice this morning at 1:30 p.m., that would be a great time to present them to Bhante
Mm.
so we can address them, and so we can give a nice shape to the whole weekend retreat. All right. So make sure to shut off your electronic equipment during your practice this morning and keep a timer on. And James says, "Thank you, Bante. Yes, I found walking does work great after food." And he says, Anguttara Nikaya 5.29, I think. Maybe, may you be well.
Okay.
All right. So have a great have a great morning. And we'll talk to you later after lunch. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.